What's going on, everyone? Excuse me. Hope you're all doing well. So, today we're going to talk about poetry, or at least we're going to start talking about poetry. And I want to focus on two things, two pieces of figurative language, and that is theme and that is metaphor. So, the other ones we will get to. Simile, you probably already know that, right? Simile is pretty basic stuff. And like the definitions for metaphor and theme are not difficult. It's identifying them, it's interpreting them. And you might have one idea and somebody might have another idea. And as long as you can prove that based on what the poet or the lyricist or the author said, then it works. That's the thing I like about English class the most, is that a couple of people can have a couple different ideas and they both can be right. So let's review. These definitions are not tough. Okay. Metaphor. That's just like simile, only it doesn't have the like or as, which that makes it tough because it's open to interpretation. And we'll see that with the first song we're going to do. And then the other one, again, definition, not hard. Theme, it's the author's message. Are they trying to teach you something? Not every song has a theme. Not every book has a theme. Not every poet writes a theme in their poetry. But sometimes it's there. And English teachers love to kind of dissect that, just like in science class. So something I would like to dissect with you all today is a song, or at least the lyrics, and by Alicia Keys, called Girl on Fire. And the first thing we got to figure out is, probably this girl is not literally on fire. So right there we have metaphor for something. Let's look at some of these lyrics. Just like with poetry, which is separated into prose, which is separated into paragraphs. We have poetry that is separated into stanzas. Okay, stanzas. Or with songs, you might hear verse. But with poetry, you'll definitely hear stanza. It's just a way to separate ideas, pretty much. So take a look at this. I'm not sure if this is the first stanza or not. It looks like it could be one long stanza. And it could be just the way I printed it. But she's just a girl. Okay, probably nothing too bad right there. She's just a girl, and she's on fire. Now, after that first line, I'm not sure if that gives us any clues. At any time, somebody wants to chime in, just put up a hand. But, I mean, if she's literally on fire, we got a problem. She's not literally on fire. So what's the fire? What's the metaphor for that? What does that represent? I would argue after one line, we really don't know quite yet. But, I mean, when you think of fire in everyday language, like fire is hot. So she could be very attractive, right? That could be one thing. But if somebody is on fire, think about like a sports team. If they're on fire, they're doing a lot of winning. So maybe she's winning at some aspect of life. Not sure. Let's take a look at the second line. Hotter than a fantasy, lonely like a highway. So those two words there, I mean, those two ideas in that line seem to be in contrast to each other. I'll use a word like juxtapose. Juxtapose. If you've ever seen that, and like an English teacher has talked about juxtaposed, authors, poets will often do this within one line or one paragraph where they have two different ideas that are the total opposite right next to each other. Why? Because it shows the differences that much more. So if you look, she's hotter than a fantasy. So for me, one interpretation, that means like I think she's probably pretty attractive. Hotter than a fantasy. But the next one, we do have a simile there. Lonely like a highway. Well, she's lonely. We know that much. Think of a highway. I mean, if you think of like a highway in Boston rush hour, that's not lonely at all. Pretty busy. But then you could dive even deeper. Well, all of those people, like they are definitely surrounded by people, but they might be in their car feeling quite alone, feeling depressed. You got a whole bunch of different emotions with people in their own cars at rush hour. But you could go out west, some of those highways like just rarely see anybody. So two different kinds of interpretations could literally mean a highway with very few cars, or it could be like rush hour where everyone is just isolated by themselves. They don't have anyone around them unless they're carpooling. But, that's just one interpretation. The next one, let me make this a little bigger. It's the third line. She's living in a world and it's on fire. Okay, now this is where theme might come into play. This is not the first time I've read this. That's the thing about poetry here that you might hate, or songs, is that they're not meant to be read just once. When you have a book, which I have a book over here, it's an Italian book, but I have a book right here. This is probably meant to be read once. A lot of people who like to read, they'll read a book once and then they will get rid of it, whatever. Maybe read it in a couple of years, but poetry is meant to be read over and over, analyzed. Songs, if they're well written, they're meant to be read, listened to over and over, right? And then each time you listen to it, you might think of something different. Or if you get to be my age at 46, a song or a poem I read in my teens or my 20s, I would interpret it differently today, possibly. So this is not the first time I've looked at this stuff, right? So don't think that, the first time I read this, I'm getting all these ideas. No, it comes from analyzing. So in my opinion, of those first three lines here, we have fire being talked about twice. Okay. The world is on fire and she is on fire. Now, sometimes it's helpful. I didn't mean to do that, but sometimes it's helpful to know a little bit about the author, like for Stephen King. I know some of it, excuse me. I know some of his themes. He has certain messages that he often tries to get across. Dave Matthews Band, one of my we might listen to some Dave Matthews Band because I think Dave Matthews is a great lyricist. Maybe the Beatles even. We'll listen to them. I'm just looking at that poster. So once you know an author well, like, they've talked about this before. So I'm a little bit of an Alicia Keys fan, but I can imagine, I know some of the things that she's talked about before, and some things that she's passionate about is empowering women. So right there, like based on what I know about her already, what I've heard, I'm like, this song might be about empowering women. So she's living in a world and it's on fire. So think about fire when it's bad. We just read, Gasp, where somebody's house burned down and their restaurant burned down. So fire can also be destructive. So she might be on fire. She might be doing really well, but then it's the world that's trying to hold her down, that's trying to consume her. So I'm not sure if you've studied all that much history, but for a long time, there were certain places for women. Oh, you just stay in the kitchen and have babies. Hopefully this happened way before you were born. Hopefully it's getting better. But this might be a piece on female empowerment, like empowering women. The next line is, let me make it a little bigger here. Filled with catastrophe, but she knows she can fly away. Whatever that is. She's got both feet on the ground. So I think this is talking about things that we know a little bit more. Like we don't have to interpret as much. Like she knows she can fly away. That could be just like, okay, she knows that she can get away. She can leave. I don't know, leave the world. Then that's a whole nother theme that has been set in the excuse me. Allergy season. That's been said in the past. When I was in college, I took a female studies course, and we had to read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins, I think it was. And This was written back in the 1930s or 40s, but it was about a woman who was being controlled like by society, saying like you have to do certain things. She didn't want to do those. She didn't want to have babies. She wanted to have a career. She wanted to be creative and express herself. And so she was like kind of put in an institution where all she could look at every day was this yellow wallpaper. And I believe it ended with like her suicide. The only way that she felt like she could be truly free. So with what I know about that, like when it says like she can fly away, she's a woman that feels like she's being, or a girl, she's being felt like she's being held down. Like she can fly away, she can escape somehow the world. I don't know. That just kind of like the first thing I thought of, like, oh, taking that way out, huh? Because that has been kind of we might call it like a theme or a touchstone where like other women in the past, or men and women, have written about that. Like the only way out might be taking your own life. But the next one is like she's got both feet on the ground. So it could be she's like firmly planted, she's rational, she's not thinking kind of crazy. Like, okay, this is getting a little long. Poetry can be extremely tough. I threw a bunch of things at you. Hope this helps. We will talk plenty about that kind of stuff this week. So just a little glimpse.